Hi, Molly.
Hi, Kim.
How are you?
Good, thank you.
So you wrote a screenplay. What is it called?
I wrote a screenplay. It's called Harry and Claire.
All right.
It's been in development prior to meeting Brad. I had a couple of other people help give me some ideas, but no one really wanted to commit, so I had set it aside until I met Brad, and then I asked him after he read my first novel and really liked it if he would be interested in taking a look at it, and that's how we got started.
And what was that collaboration with Brad Mays? He's your director?
He is the director and the filmmaker, really. I don't know if that's always the same, but anyway, wonderful. He's really patient. I think his ideas have been excellent. I think he understood the story and what was at stake for these two characters without my really having to explain it. So it's been it's been exciting.
And how did that collaboration actually manifest itself? Was there a lot of talking on the phone, face
Well,
to face?
Facebook has been huge. We knew each other through Facebook, and then I can't remember how he knew about my book, which I think I sent it to him. I may have made him buy it, but I think I sent it to him. And then, yeah, a lot of time on Facebook and then on the phone. We've met twice, but one time my mother had just broken her neck. I was going to have him to dinner. That did not work out. And then the other time his movie was premiering and he was very he had all these people wanted to see him. So I just showed up and said yay.
So getting back to the story, can you talk a bit about what you wanted to say about wealth, love, addiction?
So, money is an interesting thing. We didn't really grow up with it, but I lived in a town where most of my friends, or many of my friends, grew up with so much that sometimes their houses had to be made smaller to live in. It was that kind of a place. And when kids turned 16, most of them got BMWs and Mercedes Benzes. I had my parents' Beetle that they let me use every once in a while. We were not in the same demographic. There was a sense that we could do anything we wanted to do. During the holidays, people went to places like Verbier and skiing and Paris, and they went on these trips, and a lot of privilege. Addiction, some of it I think came with it. A lot of parents drank. It's the 60s and the 70s. The movie's set in the early 80s, but I was born in 1957. So drinking was very much on most people's menus, and a lot of dinner parties, vast amount of drinking. I had never heard of AA until I came into it. It was different. I mean, sometimes I would visit people in the Midwest and no one drank the way the people in my family and friends drank.
And what did you want to say about love with the story?
So love is hard. These two characters are, Harry's mother is dying of alcoholism and probably depression, though in those days, didn't talk about that much. His father's already dead. She's never really had a life outside of her family. He's taken over his father's job, and she drinks all the time, his mother. So he doesn't really have a family. So he's very much a loner, and the bar has become kind of his home. When he meets Claire, his immediate reaction to her is that she's very spoiled and sort of thoughtless, but then he also sort of sees this wounded animal in her, this wounded person who is lost. She's literally lost. I mean, he finds her in what's essentially a bodega, in New York, one of those kind of places where people sometimes can get food, and she's passed out, and that's where he finds her. And he doesn't really understand what's going on with her, and she is on the brink of a breakdown, really, caused by not ever addressing a gang rape that she's been through, and also how much she drinks. They're both very young, but they're both kind of in trouble.
So you talked a little bit about Princeton and your growing up, but can you talk a little bit more about that and to what degree this story is autobiographical?
Well, it's set in the city, so it would be sort of after, when I grew up in Princeton. It's set in either in New York or Chicago in some ways, where it could be either. I started drinking when I was 15, seriously using alcohol as a way to manage my feelings. And so the alcoholism part of it is very autobiographical. And I had a lot of company in that, though I was also very ashamed of it. At the same time, I maintained this kind of profile of success. I did not badly in high school, and I had a 4.0 in college. But it was all very much controlling how much I really wanted to be drinking. I couldn't handle my emotions, how I felt about things, my family, without drinking. And I'm not sure I can blame that on anything, but I would say that when we grew up in Princeton and during the time we were there, most of our parents modeled a certain way of living that had a lot to do with life being made better by having a gin and tonic. It was a kind of cult, that you have cocktails and then you have dinner and fine wine, and then if someone went over the edge and was an alcoholic, then you called them that, but you didn't have any sort of solution. They were just the alcoholic that lived down the street.
So you usually write in prose. What about this story makes you want to tell it in cinematic terms?
It's a really good question, and it's hard. I mean, I think I actually saw it first as in the opening, which I'm not going to give away. I actually saw it in a kind of waking dream, this moment between this girl and this boy, Harry and Claire, when they first meet. And so once I had that in my mind, the story sort of unscrolled as a visual. But I don't really feel that I'm a screenplay writer. So my sense of it was that I really needed to find someone to collaborate with if they were willing. But most of it also was written in dialogue. All of it was written in dialogue, actually, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. And then I got the Robert McKee book, and I followed all these directions until I got right. I got really bored, and I read all these screenplays. But then when I read Woody Allen's screenplay, it turns out that because he directs it and writes it and produces it, he hardly has any notes. So I felt very justified in having these very mysterious, like I would have a character come in, I wouldn't describe them. But of course, Woody Allen knew what his character looked like, felt like, smelled like, whatever. So it was very confusing, short of going to film school. And I already had a master's in fine arts in fiction writing, so I wasn't really ready for that. So I would say I learned through, or I am learning through trial and error,
Yeah, the Coen brothers do the same thing. They direct their own stuff, so when you read their screenplays, it directs the shot.
Stripped down. Mm-hmm. And you think, oh, look, a screenplay is not supposed to have all these directions. That's pushy. Right. But in some ways, it's not true.
Right. Yeah. But it's an interesting balance.
It is.
You really have to get the telling details. I feel like that crossover.
But then as a writer, I've always disliked that idea of not leaving it up to the reader. And that's where I think there's a bit of a split, because the viewer shouldn't have that much freedom. I don't know. I don't think they can, because if you're watching something on a screen, it's there, It's interesting.
So what is it about, so you've done prose for quite some time. What is it about the cinematic universe that's appealing to you?
Well, I always loved movies, and my mother loved movies. She grew up in the 40s, and it was what they did. They would go all day long to the movie theater, and she absolutely loved movies. And I was raised on film. we also went to live abroad a lot and like watched, I saw La Traviata when I was like 11. And I saw some really raunchy Italian movies when I was a really little kid, Jules and Jim, and then all the English movies. I saw all the Alfie, and because we lived abroad a lot, and then back in America, all the James Bond. I went to movies and still do all the time. I never looked at them much, I must admit, from a technical standpoint, and I'm even having trouble doing that now. I usually just disappeared, which is why I can't go to scary films, because I will end up hysterical going to a scary movie. And I had to leave Schindler's List. I was pregnant when I saw it, and that scene when they take the baby, and I'm sure I'm not alone in this, but when they take the children away from the parents, I had to leave the theater. I came back, but I had to walk out. Oh my God. So.
Anything else you want to say about your finally written screenplay, Ms. Molly?
I'm not allowed to say this, but I'm going to go ahead and say it because Brad keeps telling me that I should claim the writing of it, but I think without him, this would not be a movie. I believe that. And I think that, yes, I did write it, but I can't think of a good metaphor, It really was his help that made this come to life, and hopefully that will make it come to screen. So I think that's what I really want to say. I want to say that he's awfully gifted at working with writers, and that is amazing because we're a difficult bunch.
Well, that's just because they're not writers too.
Exactly.
And that's their problem.
Yeah, I think so.
If you could edit that out, that'd be
Yeah,
great.
you can take out you can take it all out because he doesn't. He made, and I'm just like,
Whatever.
whatever.